Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Hey, Drew's not here and I'm not doing the thing. I can't. It's like his thing. He's skiing all week up in Jackson Hole, which I've been there. I've never been there in the winter. I've been there in the summer. I love it to death. Great town. Hope he's having fun on his week off. We're trying to be more chill in the off season, but we have a fun crossover episode bringing in someone I haven't talked to in a while, Davis Mattek. How are you doing today, Davis?
You know, I'm doing great. It's just one of those things. The universe always tends to work in these serendipitous ways. I was like, who should I talk to this week? And I was like, I have not talked to Andy and Drew in a long time. And there's like a good angle because the last time we would have done one of these crossovers, it would have been way before you. You guys were powered by BetSperts and had a cool sleek production chamber, but more importantly, sports betting legalization was kind of just starting, just sort of we were just learning about the FanDuel free bets and boosted promos and whatnot. And now, that's like all my Twitter feed is people, being like their underdog parlays, their prize picks tabs for the day. It's like sports betting now is honestly, it's got to be way bigger than DFS was even in like 2016.
Yeah, and it's funny too. There's the evolution of media and how it's portrayed in the media too. And I even said this to producer Dan this morning. I'm not mad at Calvin Ridley for gambling. I'm mad at Calvin Ridley for placing parlays with that many legs. Like, come on, buddy. At least try to win. So, yeah, and it is funny too. I had to mute. I won't name the sports book. I had to mute an official sports book this morning or last night, which is like, all right, this tweet was way too dumb at this point for me to even like have this on my timeline. And Twitter's broken anyway, so who knows if it even works.
It is. We'll
figure it out.
Bad, dude. The usability of that website gets worse like every single day.
It sucks because I love it so much. But yeah, and you bring a probably a very unique perspective too because of your DFS background. We'll talk about that eventually, how the DFS landscape has evolved and kind of due to this. But yeah, I was gonna say a few years back it was what, New Jersey. Who were the first couple states? I feel like Pennsylvania was up there.
Jersey, Pennsylvania were amongst the first.
I felt like I had, I knew plenty of people in New York who would say like I went down to Jersey and I gambled at a legal book, or I knew people that lived in Jersey. I knew people obviously that now, especially Noops lives in Pennsylvania. I knew some people on both sides of that state that were taking advantage of that right off the bat. But yeah, it does feel like now there's such a big chunk of the country that has legalized gambling that you're seeing more and more people, that's kind of their bread and butter rather than, well, I'm stuck with my PPHs. I'm stuck with my offshores. I'm still stuck. And I know we're both kind of in the same boat. Like, how long would it take you to get across the river from where you sit?
Not far. Like the morning of the Super Bowl, me and my brother-in-law went and got a coffee over on it takes about 15 minutes. I don't go every week. I don't do it for like every golf tournament for every big weekend in the NFL. But like, if there's something coming up that I want to do it, I'll go for it. But there's plenty of ways to get action down. And honestly, the thing is that I've realized is we are already transitioning out of, free money being available all the time on these books, free bets and promotions and stuff. Cause they're, one thing is, they did just spend so much money on customer acquisition, and that free money windfall is really starting to decrease now, even on DraftKings and FanDuel.
Yeah. And I can say this too, as someone who I delve a little into the affiliate side with some of the stuff I'm doing over just, some of the SEO work and the writing with the various websites that BetSperts has acquired. And you get to know, like, one, you have relationships with people at the sports books. And it's funny too, because think about like, what's a really big sporting event where you could get a lot of potential new clients this time, or last month, I guess is what I was going to say. And it's the Super Bowl, and it's funny now. I get a little more peek behind the curtain, and you find out sportsbooks don't actually like the Super Bowl as a customer acquisition point because you get low quality customers. You get people that put $100 in, blow it all in the Super Bowl, and they don't bet again until September, or maybe
they're out.
They're never again. So, a lot of you people who did get some of these early offers, like you were blessed because they were huge. They call them bet and get, like bet $5, get 200, bet, make any bet, get a bunch of free money. Like those are going to be fewer and far between for you. The double dipping at various, state to state at the same book is going to be harder now because those bet and gets are just free money that they're giving away. And those are going to be more rare. You didn't see a lot of that around Super Bowl promotions because it's just way more expensive. So books are kind of scaling down on that. So the salad days of the just, hey, it's popping up in a state near you. Go cash everything you want here. Go get all this free money, take advantage of it. That is starting to come to an end, although it is, there's still ways to take advantage of free bets or risk-free bets and stuff like that. It's not quite as much of an expected value as some of those initial offers were for sure.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's sort of even more transitioning now. What I see more in terms of the free money available type stuff is the forced parlay apps actually do that stuff more often, where they give away the free square. Jalen Hurts over 0.5 rushing yards in the Super Bowl, or Tiger Woods to make just whatever. And I actually think for the $100 better, right? I'll deposit $100 for the Super Bowl, lose it all. I actually think the forced parlay model is way more friendly for the average person who just wants to get a little bit of action on games than even the crazy, the sportsbook shot of the 220 to 1 same game parlay that hits.
I've never heard it called forced parlay. I like that. First off, that was something I didn't see coming. And again, pour one out, RIP Monkey Knife Fight, it's hilarious. I haven't logged on to Monkey Knife Fight and I don't know, like pre-COVID, probably.
Yeah.
And I got an email from them like, hey, you have $7.50 in your account. You should withdraw this. I'm like, man, is it worth trying to figure out the password to that account at this point and see if it's even hooked up to my PayPal or anything? But, that did exist a long time ago, but I didn't see this coming. The prevalence of the Prize Picks and, Underdog has a pick'em game. Obviously, Underdog is a lot different than just straight forced parlay pick'ems. They have a ton of best ball and get into that sort of traditional DFS evolution. But yeah, the we call them pick'em stuff, I guess. That's kind of the parlance I've used with people in my circles. But the forced parlay stuff is good because I think just people are pretty bad at math. That's where the SGP stuff comes in too.
Well, people are bad at math, and people just take overs. I do it. I mean, I'm not a super serious. Like, I love to bet on sports, but I don't need to do it to sustain my lifestyle. So, like, if I want to place a 150 to 1 parlay that for a game or something I'm going to be experiencing, you better bet I'm taking overs.
Yeah, it's like 6 overs mashed into an SGP for sure. And it is funny. There's probably, and I've talked to people and I've seen people who've done like deep dives into stats, and I can't remember exactly the time frame, but they said, hey, here's I scraped everything from Pinnacle or here's all the player props for the NFL last year. If you bet every single NFL running back's
blind
total under, it was like a 10% ROI or, something hilariously, there's definitely a heavy shade to the over. And if you go look at, and technically this was over, but at Prize Picks, I made some decent money just because, God bless them, I had some people with some information. I made some decent money on Prize Picks with some combine stuff. And basically, I think I played 7 different guys 40 times. None of them were under. It's the exact same thing. Everybody wants to bet the most points scored in the fastest 40 time. Like all the 40 times that I ended up in these entries were slower, essentially over the time they set, and they all ended up. I wish I had taken a screenshot of the initial offerings. I bet like 90% of them moved in that direction to be slower rather than faster. It is just kind of human nature to want to see, it's so tough to bet against stuff, and that's why you see like the player prop guys I know that do the best are just hammering unders, and there's so much of more of a long tail to unders anyway. With all it takes is the guy to tweak his ankle and say, there's more. There's 82 games, guys. Maybe I'll play next week.
The lines are normally fair, right? I don't know, 95% of lines are like pretty fair. Maybe not in how they're priced, but in how they're projected, right? So like you see Anthony Davis rebound prop, 85% of nights you go check that against the best publicly available projection, and it's probably going to be right about fair. But you would very rarely want to be betting the over because you're not capturing any chaotic upside. You got no black swan in there, no injury, no blowout, nothing like that, right? It's all of that. Weirdly, all the upside of those wagers is actually captured in betting the unders. And I even can know that. And when the next time I go fire player props, I'm going to be like, all right, who can go over? Who am I going to look there? Who's going to go over their prop tonight?
Yeah, and that's the biggest part of some, the just not speaking into the media companies, but you see it sometimes from them. But the biggest selling point on when somebody makes a player prop over, they say, "Hey, this guy has done this. He's achieved this in 7 out of the last 10 times he did it."
7 of his last 10 times, right?
And it's like, I have this sneaking suspicion that the people in charge of setting that price also know
that.
Yeah, and it's still priced where it is, and obviously the guys who do really well with some of that stuff are able to figure out matchup stuff or just minutes, rotations, however they do it, to figure out an actual good median projection and make some bets based on the pricing. So it's well beyond anything I've been doing, but it is funny how much player props has come into play too with a lot of the stuff we've done. I think it's because like the same game parlay is boring if it's just I'm taking the Rangers in the over. Like that's not a fun same game parlay. That's something I did 10 years ago at books that would let you parlay a side in the total, and honestly eventually learned how to do it correlated if you had some books that did let you do that and find some correlated dogs and unders in that sense. But to add all the player props is what makes it exciting. And I get the emails too from the operators saying like, this is some guy bet $15,000 on this last night and he cashed for this. Like people want to see that. People want the scratch offs. That's why scratch offs sell. Like that's just another bad math. Like you can go look at how much scratch off costs. It says the odds on the back. Like it's just it's a fundraiser. It's like it's a raffle, guys. They need to take some of that money. In Minnesota, we use that for the outdoor, whatever, the wildlife fund. The wildlife fund isn't doing that to lose money. Like, the scratcher players got us this month.
They game theoried us too hard. So no renovations for the wildlife this year.
Yeah, I guess all the loons are gonna die now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, and part of it is too. It's like who is doing the education? Who's like when you watch sports betting content on Fox or ESPN or whatever. It's not like, you can bet over 8.5 strikeouts for Spencer Strider, but if the price moves to -130, you shouldn't bet it. It's like no one's doing that explanation. And I think we sort of all universally know that Americans are bad at math, including myself. I'm not really that good at math. I would say I'm more better at like logic problems than at math. But even I, right? It's like, well, if Spencer Strider's good at -115, it's probably good at -130, right? And it's not. That totally changes what you're betting.
No, and like X times out of 100, it isn't going to matter. And people will always harken, it didn't matter last time I did this. It's still cashed. Like he went well over the total. But I mean, even this morning, I seen people giving out Wake Forest -2.5 in the ACC tournament, and a bunch of money came in on Wake Forest. It got steamed up. I think it closed a little lower. It came back down with some buyback, but it went up to 4. And if you see your favorite personality betting Wake Forest -2.5, and you go to your book and it's 3.5, what the hell's the difference? Like I want to be aligned with this person. They're a winner. They do well in this sport. They're smart. Wake Forest won by 3 today. Like it's not always going to come, but 1 or 2 losses over 100 is just such a massive difference. And again, that goes back to the we're all bad at math kind of mentality as well. And especially when it comes down to the marketing and the stuff you see from sports books around some of that stuff as well.
Yeah. And back to the player prop things, I think they're even amongst people who are pretty good, who like maybe have played a lot of DFS, they have a subscription to a site. Like there are people who documented like crush props, like the established the run team. I think for like 2 years in a row, they have like crazy ROI, like double-digit ROI, NFL, NBA, crush the draft. Ryan Noonan, who works for 4for4.
Yeah.
And, he found an angle of like, what was it, like tackle props where he was hitting like a really absurd clip. But then that
was one of my biggest bets in the Super Bowl. It's like I finally found like, oh, it's finally available like at multiple books for half decent limits. And I don't even remember what player it was, but one of the ones he liked, I found at an even better price than he got offshore. And I hit it pretty hard. Like obviously the halftime show was the big casher for, bitch better have my money. But one of the Chiefs defenders made me quite a bit of money, and more along the lines, Ryan made me a bit of money. And I think, and we've talked about it on the show before too. It's some of the niche betting like that, you're going to get limited, and that's part of the game too. But like, if you're sitting there struggling and redepositing for just hammering, the sides and totals in the NFL.
Hammering NFL sides and totals, right?
Yeah, on a Sunday morning, just hammering them after one of the most efficient markets this side of the ocean is, been hammered into place for a week. You're losing at that. I think that's kind of just start thinking, like you said, think logically. Like Ryan did. He actually, he does research into the scorekeepers. Excuse me, not scorekeepers. The statisticians, like the official
score. They're called scorekeepers in the.
I think it is called. I think stat guys or whatever.
Remember the controversy with who was Jaren Jackson Jr. the Memphis Grizzlies. They were.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Scorekeeper was biased towards him. That I think was kind of a red herring. This I don't think this is true anymore, but it used to be that the home New Orleans Pelicans scorekeeper used to boost Anthony Davis's rebounds and blocks and steals like to like a degree that it like needed to change. It was like a 10 or 15% boost at home. That's like that's really inside the weeds. But yeah, you bring up the problem, which is a lot of these books really have transitioned towards what do they call it? The European model, basically that once you become someone who's really taken them and you're getting a lot of closing line value on your bets, like they're not taking any risk, like not minimal risk adjustment, like no risk. Like you beat CLV on a Sunday NFL game twice. Like that's it. You're getting $7.87 down on stuff after that.
Yeah, I have some legal accounts, from signing up it's funny. I've signed up for legal accounts in 4 different states, I think.
Same.
This point, Colorado, God, maybe I even was up in Michigan once and added one, but most of it Iowa. And my DraftKings account is clean as a whistle because it's like how you say, like, you won't go across the river for anything. I don't drive. And again, it takes me a little longer. It's probably 25 minutes, maybe a half hour of traffic. And by traffic, I mean, I get behind a semi on this one county road that's on the way to Iowa. It's a little bit longer for me, and I won't go down there for anything. But DraftKings has a lot of bad prices on golf outrights once you get down the board. Like, hey, this guy is 80 to 1, 100 to 1 everywhere. And DraftKings is like 225. And it's like, if I honestly think this guy has a decent chance at 100 to 1, and I have to, some of these high variance tournaments, or you get in these alternate field tournaments where there's a bunch of bad names and somebody goofy is going to win, and I'm betting a lot of long shots, I'll take a spin down there. So I'm like 0 for 90 on golf outrights at DraftKings. So my account's nice and clean. Like, I've hit a few small bets when I'm traveling and stuff, but they hopefully that's keeping me around for a long time, honestly.
It's funny you mentioned that. So my primary account that I've used, I never got limited. I've had this account forever and I never got limited. They let me get whatever down. And I'm not trying to get huge money down on a lot of these bets, but I got limited because I bet Shohei Ohtani to win American League MVP the year he won at 35-1. I mean, I bet this. I probably bet it 5 times. It's the biggest sports betting win of my life. And like when I went to go bet it the 4th or 5th time, the most they let me bet on it was like $12 or something, because it had continued to move so much. And ever since then, it limits the amount I can get down on parlays, like on any kind of prop builder or parlay. I can't bet more than like $20 or $25, which is hilarious because the trend line after that, it's been down. It's because I'm mostly betting golf outrights. Like I just honestly, I don't really have the work ethic to go in and like arb trade, 0.5 differences on a stuff. Like I know people do this. People, I forget the name of the guy. People are always mad at him on Twitter, but he like is always posting about how he's just arb trading across like 30 books and he just locks in profit or whatever. Which is, I think, a totally reasonable way if like that's what you want to do. I think it's a totally reasonable thing to do, but it's a lot of work, a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. If you're very risk averse and you have the time, I've talked to somebody, I don't know this person personally. It was just like a rando who DM'd, but they're limit betting player props across different books whenever they found arb opportunities. And now, there's obviously services that track that stuff and find it for you. Like, was it Odds Jam? I think does some of that, and you can look at best. I mean,
that's the guy that people are always mad at. The
Odds
Jam guy.
I think he's a smart fella. I followed him on Twitter for a little bit, and then I had to just stop because he just tweets like 900 times a day about and it's like I just can't take all this information, and I need my timeline moving a little slower. So I think he's got stuff figured out, but there's a lot of stuff everyone has to figure out. And yeah, the people that are arbing stuff, like if you're gonna get, I mean, that's the thing that makes it like 99.99% risk-free money. Like you have to know you're going to get paid, because you can arb $2,000 on either side to win $100, and that's a free $100. You can't lose. Either one is going to win or the other one's going to win. And
right.
if you found a true positive ROI arb play, but if you don't know 100% that if you're betting with Larry down at the VFW who gave you an account on Ace, and he might stiff you, then it's not really risk-free. So I think that's the only thing that scared me off that. The amount of time you'd put in if you ever got stiffed on that, because it's all small margin stuff. No one's ever arbing 100% ROI trades.
You're arbing like 0.03% trades.
Yeah, you wager $4,000 to win like $40, but it's a free $40 when you do that 100 times a week, and boom, there you've made a bunch of money. But if all it takes is one guy to stiff you, if you're using a paperhead like that, or if you have issues with any sort of book, and truthfully too, like we dogged on the legal books a little for limiting the European model and stuff. I don't want to let all the offshores off the hook for that either.
No, that's okay. That's another good point. Because I've seen this, I'm sure you've seen this too. Legalization ruins sports betting. Look at these legal books, and they'll do a screen cap with a terrible price, right? They'll be like, it's minus 500 one side, plus 200 the other side.
I've seen, you're referencing the exact one I was thinking of.
But it's like, okay, one, we all know these offshore books do the same thing, right? They do and even worse, a lot of these offshore books don't even offer minus 110 plus 110 on anything. It's all minus 115, it's all bad. Like Pinnacle, you can get fair. I mean, I don't even have a Pinnacle account, but I just know from looking, like sometimes you can get fair prices there. But yeah, I think you make a great point, which is that a lot of the condemnation of the legal books makes it sound like the offshore books are running this great model. But really what it is, it's just a disappointment that sports betting legalization has come to the United States and it's come in a kind of half-assed form.
Yeah, and it's not even, I understand like the business side of things. If I'm running a sports book and somebody is just wrecking me and I'm seeing like 8 accounts all betting the same stuff at the same time and they're limit betting and they're wrecking me, I'm probably going to do something about it. But it is disappointing that, just these, we call them Rec Plus. Like you have just the donkeys who just, I'm going to put $100 in on payday every week, and I'm going to lose it on the NBA by Saturday afternoon. Like that's life. And then, people that just enjoy doing $20 a week on parlays, like the scratcher guys, recreational playing just for fun. And then like Rec Plus is like, I don't want to do this professionally. I don't want to be risking tens of thousands every week, but I don't want to lose. I don't want this hobby to cost me money. I'd like to scratch out a little bit of winning. And those are the people that they weren't usually getting limited at, the offshores. I mean, even bookmaker will limit you to certain things. I know people who have, usually it is going back to the niche betting, it's, hey, you're betting the lowest levels of tennis at, $250 a pop, which is our max, and you're winning a lot. Like,
yeah, if you beat a book at Challenger Tour tennis, like you just kiss that account goodbye, I guess.
Yeah, and to be fair to bookmaker, just they have some people I know have been limited in just certain markets like that. Like you still go bet 100,000 on a football game if you want, you're fine. But Challenger tennis is, we're just taking that off the board for you or whatnot. And obviously, I won't drag all the names, but there's
do you think that's fair? Do you think that is, do you think that basically in and because these places are still competing for our business, right?
Mhm.
Offshore, legal, not whatever, they're still competing for business. I mean, it does to me at a certain point, it feels unfair that basically these large, I mean, let's call it what it is. These are large multinational corporations worth billions of dollars allowed to basically say, we can take your money to any extent we want. You have $100,000 on our website, you can lose $100,000 on our website, but we are not going to open ourselves up enough that you could take $100,000 from us.
And I wonder, there's 2 trains of thought here. And the one is eventually they'll run out of, the waves and waves of new players because all the states that legalized have legalized. And then at that point, your customer acquisition becomes tougher. And it becomes mostly just people who are turning 18 or 21 or whatever in that state. And, there's still, everyone's going to have an 18, somebody turned 18 while we were talking just now. And it happens every day. You're still going to find people who are transitioning from fantasy or DFS or turning 18, but it will slow down. That churn will start to catch up and they might have to think twice. And anyone who had that argument says, well, they've been doing this in Europe for a long time. And that they're just fine. Go look at how much the CEO of Bet365 makes. Like those, the European model's working just fine in Europe. And again, the counter to that is, I don't know if it's something about the American mindset or Jesus, our manifest destiny, like brains, but like we can't bet $5 on something for the most part. And you go over there, and I've talked to people who've been in shops over there. People are putting like, just give me £3 on my side. Like they're treating it just like it's fun. They don't need like several $100s on their local football team every weekend.
No, it's like let me get $6 on Crawley Town or whatever.
Yeah, I mean they do bet quite a bit differently over there. The average bet set is much smaller for the recreational bettor. So maybe that's going to be the difference here. But I think it's business sucks. Go watch The Founder, man. So I have that in my head because I watched that a few weeks ago. But like Ray Kroc was an SOB, says so in the song, and sometimes it's just sometimes
right,
it's just like if the market, and by the market I mean the consumers, are going to let them get away with that. And again, the regulatory agencies don't seem to be concerning themselves with much of that. It's more along the lines of their top concern is usually problem gambling or making sure that that's being addressed by everybody and making sure, and that is, I'll bring that up in a moment, but there's no recourse, so you just move on. You either get new accounts somewhere else, try to get some clean accounts with your wife, or you just go back to betting offshore. So if there's no recourse and there's still, the numbers still look good, and I'm guessing for FanDuel especially, the numbers still look great. And I don't think there'll be much of a change in that sense.
Which just, I mean, to me that feels very inherently unfair, which is that all the risk is being taken on by the people. No risk. I guess you wouldn't say no risk is being taken on by FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM and whatever, because they're still huge businesses that have employees or whatever, and maybe tomorrow everyone will decide sports gambling is bad and they don't want to do it anymore or whatever. Like that's definitely, like, some of these books are going to go under. They're just going to run out of operational costs.
We've already seen that. If you to Fubo, and there's been a small smattering of books that got into it and just, hey, I don't have the spend, I can't compete. You even see that when a new state opens. And again, this is some stuff that I wasn't privy to a couple years ago. I didn't understand the affiliate side as well. But a new state opens, and you would think, well, every sports book, hey, we have to get everybody right now. Like, today's day one of legalization in Virginia, Massachusetts, what have you. I got to go grab as many customers as I can. We've seen that recently where some of the sports books who aren't DK and FanDuel essentially just won't market for a few weeks. They'll just hold back because they know, like, hey, we've tried to spend as much as the big dogs spend
and just ran out of money.
That's just pissing. It's just pissing into the wind, and the conversion rates. You just wait a few weeks and be like, hey, did you already burn up your bonuses on the other two books? Like, come check out. Hey, we're Caesars, and we have some tier credits for you too if you want to stay at one of our properties. And here's another bonus. You've seen a little more of that where, there are some operators that are getting a little smarter about how they're spending their money, because it felt just like the $400,000 crack party, at first, where everybody was just, I mean, you'd see it on Twitter. People were just bitching and moaning. Like, does every other commercial have to be for a sports book when they'd watch sports? Which, it's like, shit, go to Australia or something.
Man. I have heard a lot of, there's been a lot of pushback amongst sort of like, lib type sports writers, a lot of NBA writers just being like, why the fuck? Like, I'm trying to watch Lakers Heat, and it's just like FanDuel this, DraftKings that. So let's, which I'm a little sympathetic to. If I like, I'm sure there's some advertising product that's out there that I see that I'm like, all right, like enough. I don't need to see another Bachelor commercial or whatever. And also, maybe to some degree a little bit sympathetic to the idea that, like, sports should exist for more than just wagering purposes. Like, these guys shouldn't just be like gladiators that are there for me to bet $8 same game parlays on, but I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there's anything to be done about that, but like, I do get it. And I do think at a certain point, these companies, and we for sure saw this with DFS, for sure, 2016 era, like, people just got so sick of the DFS commercials that they were like, I'm never doing this. I'm never logging onto these dumb websites.
Yeah, I'm more sympathetic to, hey, we've got announcer X or, color broadcaster Y who has been doing this, sport for 40 years and doesn't gamble. He's not, Al.
Yeah, why are we making Lee Corso pick against the spread?
Yeah, like, well, and you see some awkward, cringy moments where it's like they clearly don't want to talk about gambling. They don't understand it that well, and they're being forced to. I kind of hate that, because it's like, I get it. Put it on the screen, on the broadcast, and, win percentages are something that, I mean, that's, win percentage is just a betting line. Truthfully, betting lines are just percentages, guys. And that's been crazily underutilized on like broadcasts for many, many years. But, at the same time, it's just like fantasy. And that was the argument for fantasy or DFS after that was, is it really so bad if it's bringing eyeballs to the screen? If this guy wasn't going to watch the NBA game, but then he did because he has a
The
future on this player.
leagues love it.
Yeah,
the leagues love
leagues
it
for sure have to be, obviously you see with the deals being struck, and I think anyone who's even involved in the sports, the announcers, the people who enjoy the sport and enjoy seeing it thrive have to understand, like, it's just good for the sport to get more eyes on it.
Right. And I mean, this is kind of neither here nor there, but I was reading an Ethan Sherwood Strauss Substack the other day, and he mentioned an angle that I had not considered, but actually sports betting legalization has been low key pretty good for women's sports. More people are watching women's tennis always does pretty well because women's tennis is kind of like a different game. Women's tennis is good. I actually kind of prefer. No, unpopular opinion, but I think the women's side of the bracket is generally pretty good. But WNBA, women's soccer, like NWSL, women's Super League type stuff actually has all kind of seen slight upticks across the board in the last 2 years. And a lot of people pretty reasonably think that it's because men who beforehand would not have been watching it or tuned in at all are betting on these games now.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who were able to really pick apart WNBA markets, even 3-4 years ago, where it's just like, oh, like there's clearly like tendencies with this ref and these players, and these numbers are just like wildly off. You'd see massive steam on like first half totals in the WNBA a few years ago, where it just I don't think the market wasn't there for betting it. And there weren't enough, sharp bettors in that market to hammer it down one way or the other, or they weren't, getting that much down, so it didn't matter. But enough people started to get involved in WNBA, and I mean, you're probably right. It's just going to be good for women's sports overall. I can say I haven't bet any NWSL, but I did bet every single. What was the last one? Euros? Is it the Women's World Cup?
I bet every the Women's Euros was amazing. The England women are that's actually so funny. People are
that was my one future. I said it's not even close, guys. And then the shtick was on the Daily Show I did that I'm going to bet every single match, and hopefully the England bails me out in the end. And honestly, getting the future almost nice as well, but that's super fun. I'm super looking forward to the Women's World Cup.
Well, people are going to be bummed out though when they realize that the England women are better than the U.S. women now. Like I think that because the U.S. women have been so good for so long, and I think the English women are clearly better. Like they're really good. Yeah, it's
kind of like it's kind of like the first time the Dream Team lost, where you're just like, oh, what happened? We had Michael and Larry and Magic, and we always just won, and that went on for years. And then finally, the rest of the world kind of started playing basketball. It was like almost unfair. It feels like the U.S. just like subsidized. Hey, you guys should have a team, so we have more teams to play in the Olympics. Yeah, we play soccer, guys. Well, maybe just get 5 guys rounded up so we can beat you by 40 here in the first half. But that'll be interesting. I hadn't heard that take yet. I hadn't really looked ahead to the World Cup or the prices. I would guarantee right now the USA would be favored over England just in the futures markets. So that's pretty interesting. I could get some more, it's coming home.
Yeah, the US is, I mean, these are the FanDuel odds. The US women are 3-1. The English women are 3.5-1. Then it's honestly a bunch of teams that can't. I just Germany and Spain. They're just not as good. They're just like the U.S. and English women are so much better than everyone else. Spain is close, but the gal who just won the women's Ballon d'Or has a torn ACL. So I don't even know I don't think she didn't play in the Euros, and I don't think she's going to be able to play in the World Cup either.
Yeah, and anyone who believes in like, oh God, I don't even want to get into the topic of like it's rigged and sports are rigged. That's a whole different conversation.
Dude, read more books, bro.
Read more.
If you just read more books, you'll learn it's all rigged. FanDuel. What happens is Clint Capella just needs one more rebound in the fourth quarter, and what happens?
Vegas calls. Yeah.
No, just someone at FanDuel. It's their job. They monitor like, okay, what is Patriot USA Patriot 40, 20, 69. He's about to take us for $112. So what we need to do is we got to call Nate McMillan. I guess Nate McMillan's not their coach anymore. We got to say, you got to tell,
back then he was.
You got to tell, back then, and you got to tell Capella, no more rebounds. You about to get one? You better stop, dude. You're going to cost us $112.
I know it's a whole, we went down a mini rabbit hole there, but I was just going to say soccer is rigged for sure. Like there's been draws that have been rigged, and that's how you'll tell. Like if they make it so basically USA and England win their groups and they'll be on opposite side of the knockouts, like I guess it's probably a 50-50 chance that happens anyway, but I would really, really doubt there's a scenario where USA and England win their groups and are somehow on the same side of the bracket, because that ruins
no chance.
Like
that
ruins the final. That is the final. I mean, it's like the Niners and the Cowboys playing every year in the AFC or NFC title game. Like, hey, this is the real final, so they want that in the championship game for sure. Yeah, the rigged. Oh my God, and maybe that is worth talking about. It's like I feel, the joke people make, like, what's the moment that happened, in the past that would have been the most wild if we had Twitter and everyone has, and there's usually some good poignant comments about that. But I wonder if we didn't have Twitter and social media like we do, if people would be like the way they are with some of this stuff where, oh my God, I lost my same game parlay because this player got hurt right away and it's rigged and I want a refund. There's a weird sense of entitlement. And at first I was kind of sympathetic to the people that wanted refunds.
Never.
Where it's like,
never.
Maybe that's
how could you be sympathetic to these people?
I know. This was very early on. And I feel stupid even saying this, but it was like it had only happened a couple times, and it's like, it's almost like a bonus or a boost that the book gives you. It's like, what's the worst thing they can do? Say no? Yeah, that's fine. So like the people that were asking and then they would get refunds, it's like, that's just kind of game theory. Like if enough people bitch about it on Twitter, maybe you'll get it. But then it started to turn into they wanted it every night for everything.
Now it's a meme. Now it's anytime a guy leaves in the second quarter. Now it's yeah. I mean, I don't theoretically, I don't hate it as a one-time sort of basically it's a promotional expense, right?
Yeah.
Sportsbook X does this as a promotional expense. It's really no different than saying, we'll boost this, we'll boost these three guys to make 6 3-pointers combined from plus 110 to plus 150, right? It's very, very similar in the amount of money or the amount of equity that you're going to be losing. But to your first point, no, social media has completely rotted our brains, mine included. My brain is so rotted from social media and the internet. It's like unbelievable. But the voiding the tickets, it makes it so much worse. It's terrible.
And my favorite part about the conversation we just had was how little I knew about what was going on in women's soccer still. Producer Dan let me know that the draw is already out. And I
did not know that.
He said that if they win their groups, they will be on opposite sides of the brackets. Read more books, guys. Get to understand what's going on over there in some of these soccer draws. I'm pumped for it for sure. I kept kind of hinting at this, but you maybe talk about it too. Some people that don't know your history as well. Like, how long have you been, doing DFS stuff? I mean, just kind of as long as it existed.
Yeah, I mean, I had accounts on sites that people, if I said the names of them now, they would think it was like a parody, like Daily Joust and Draft Day and stuff like that.
There was one with Ace in the name, like Aces.
Fantasy Aces, yo.
Fantasy Aces.
I was on Fantasy Aces. Probably have a Fantasy Aces shirt because I'm in my basement right now. There's probably a Fantasy Aces shirt somewhere down here. Yeah. Which is like, it's sort of interesting because I'm like a dinosaur now. Like the amount of people who really care about DFS outside of NFL is like pretty low. Like NBA DFS is for like niche grinders only. And MLB DFS is kind of like niche grinders only. Like the stuff that I see sort of dominating the conversation is player props, forced parlay / pick'em contests. And actually, people really love best ball, which I think totally makes sense because it's like I get to lock up a season's worth of entertainment. And I probably won't win, but I probably won't lose that much either. Like you're going to get some reasonable amount of your money back. And then it's kind of like found money once you get it back a couple months later or whatever, which is nice. And honestly, the Underdog specifically has done such a good job with marketing and advertising. But yeah, DFS, but it's kind of like the people who've grinded DFS forever still grind it, but they're not like too many new players entering the ecosystem. You don't get asked about who do you like tonight in DFS at like, a dinner party or whatever. No one cares.
No, and it's stupid how easy the best ball idea was. The dumbest ideas are the best, because it's just like, what if you did the fantasy draft and that was it? Like, and there were I know some guys that were in an old school fantasy league that didn't allow trades for like many years, which is just wild. Like that's I think the thing that fantasy players like the best, but it's best ball really fit what I was looking for, because I love the draft, and then I just hate waiver wire shit. Like I can't sit and grind waiver wires and like look at all these trades. Like I keep saying I'm going to get into Dynasty because I work with the DLF guys now, and I'm going to do it, but I don't think I can do it. Like I don't know. That's such a grind too. Like that's 12 months a year.
My take would be it's actually so fun. Like I play in these leagues that I do the main event. Like I got thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars out on these leagues, but I probably spend my most time sweating out like $50 Superflex best ball dynasty leagues, because it's like a crazy feeling to be like, I put these players together over like 5 years and now I'm finally about to win. It's like I recommend Dynasty to everyone. It is like actually a blast.
I could do Dynasty best ball stuff. I'm talking about
that's what we do. So we have the off season. We have the off season where you can trade and you do the rookie draft and all that stuff. But then week 1 comes, no trades, no roster movement. It's just the points at the end. You come and check back in 4 months.
Well, and that's kind of the question I've been hinting at a little. It's like, does all this forced parlays, Dynasty, best ball, regular best ball, all this other, and then again, the stuff I got into just this week, Rainmakers, which is a byproduct of something else. Like, I wonder if DFS evolves that much at all if we don't see legalized gambling, because there was such a healthy community. Like there was everybody. I knew guys that would do that on Sundays. They'd get together, they'd all throw in $100 and they'd pick teams together. They felt like that gave them a better edge. It's like, we'll pool our money together and we'll all draft teams. That never really worked out. But like before sports betting was, out of the shadows a little, like DFS was really, really big. And I wonder if some of the evolution is due to that too, because they know like, hey, we got to come up with some new ideas. We can't just sit and rest on this one.
I think that is 100% true, because at a certain point, the business model for DFS doesn't scale because of the time issue, which is that the best players can enter into all contests. So like if you think about it like poker, Phil Ivey can't sit down and play 2-5 at the Mohegan Sun, right? Like he doesn't have the time, he doesn't have the ability. But in DFS, that's not true, right? If you are one of the 10 best, you got the best computer, you got the best sims, whatever, you can enter into every contest. There's no limit. You can be in every sport, every slate, every showdown slate, it's just, and so much of the money is going to funnel upward. And at a certain point, that doesn't make sense for the sites, right? Because like a super user is good to fill contests, but it's not good because they take so much money out of the ecosystem. And so something had to intervene where the sites themselves got to get a larger part of the pie other than just, 10% rake.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's the same thing as what we talked about with the, if the European sports betting model continues to thrive and the churn goes up and, the low end players don't, you take their money too fast, essentially, or, the medium level players, it's like, hey, maybe this guy wasn't going to beat us long term, but now we're not going to find out. That I bet a lot of players who get banned or limited weren't actually going to be, negatives on your balance sheet in the long term. So it's fun. It's the same kind of thing that
I've not heard anyone make that point. Actually, you were the first one to make that point, that a lot of these people who get limited or banned, whatever. Actually, if you would have let them bet with you for a year, you would have ended up making money off them.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's people that can get CLV by accident, over a short period of time. They luck their way into a few good entry points, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this guy's sharp, we're cutting him off. It's like, no, it turns out that guy was going to deposit, $1,000 a month and lose it for the next 6 years. Like, you done screwed up, Ron. Like, you could have had a pretty good player. I think there's probably a lot of that when you're too fast to the jump. And I mean, I've even heard, and again, this wasn't super substantiated, but it goes back to the ARB thing. Back in the day, there was always rumors of certain offshores had, they kept an eye on Pinnacle because Pinnacle was so low vig that there was often and usually these recreational books were so tilted towards favorites and overs that you could take an under there and there was overlay with the Pinnacle number where you could arb a few pennies every time with their unders and Pinnacle's overs, or, favorites, dogs, however you want to say it. And they ended up putting stuff in place that would just check, like, if somebody was only betting into lines that were arbable at Pinnacle, they would flag that customer. And they said, like, well, that can happen on accident. There's just so much overlay. Like, somebody just bets a few unders here, and it's suddenly like, oh, this guy's beating us. We need to get rid of him. I never did see that substantiated, but it made it make sense if I'm looking for people who are going to be problems for me long term.
I mean, what I've heard is that a lot of this stuff is algorithmically driven. It's not that they have. I mean, these places do have risk managers or whatever. In fact, I had Eric Patterson on the show a couple weeks ago, who does risk management for the Score for their golf stuff, which is sort of interesting. Like, I mean, it seems like a crazy job to have to try and be like, well, we can't lose too much on Tiger this week, fellas. It's sort of basically that job. But basically it's like a lot of these books think within like 10 bets they can kind of profile you as a customer. So one of the things that I've always done, because I have no idea if this is true or whatever, but go to a new state, go to I'm in Colorado. I was in Colorado for vacation. I went skiing. I went skiing 2 weekends ago, and Drew's out skiing now. And first thing I did, get off the plane, I fired 3 overs immediately, not for a ton of money or anything, but I just was like, I'm just going to fire some overs here. Just in case, right? Just in case, like, not even that I think I'm going to steal all of, the gambling money available in Colorado, or that I'm some whale or something, but just because I kind of just want to test it a little bit to see if it's true or not. But yeah, that is one thing I've heard, is that if you beat CLV or if you like crush a book on your first 10 bets or whatever, a lot of times that's something that'll flag up right away. Yeah.
Another way you can go is take your first $50 and lose it at blackjack.
I can't even open that. If I open the online blackjack, it's like, that's not going to end well for me.
Noops got me into playing some roulette and craps online. I actually won some money. I felt like, oh God, this is a bad thing. It's a super bad thing that I actually won some money, but that's good. I mean, cover play. Casino is probably even better. I mean, I've seen stats, and I read an article. I can't remember who put it out, but they talked about like the true future of these sports books, the money that they're going to make. And we didn't even get into this yet, is if the churn starts to go and they start to lose enough sports betting players, like the focus is quickly going to turn to, hey, we need online casino players, and that's, oh God.
Dude, how big is that market? Like, are people?
It's really big, and the problem gambling aspect of that is so much bigger, because somebody can Somebody can donk away all their money on sports betting too, but like, I feel like a lot of people, the barrier to entry there is, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to do that. Where everybody knows how to play roulette.
I think you're wrong. I think the barrier is like, everyone's cool smoking weed. Sports betting is like smoking weed. Everybody smokes weed, dude. Your dad will take an edible after Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. But online roulette is like heroin, where it's like, if you're doing this, you have a problem. So it's like, honestly, I think it's the fear. I think it's the societal stigma on playing online slots or whatever that would, I mean, that's what, maybe I'm just speaking from my own perspective, but that's what would keep me from doing it. I played first time ever, went to New York, 2019. We went over the bridge to go to a Giants game. And I, of course, immediately downloaded. It was my first legal sports betting experience outside of Vegas. Downloaded FanDuel app right away, put some money on. I'm like, oh shit, they got blackjack, dude. I'm in Jersey. I'm playing, and all of a sudden I'm in the back of an Uber playing fucking blackjack on my phone, and I'm like, dude, this is not right. This is dangerous.
Oh, you can play 3 hands at a time? Oh, that seems like something I might be interested in. Well, that's the thing too. Like if I don't want to portray myself as a problem gambler here, but like I live like an hour from 3 different casinos, all in different directions, roughly. So like it's kind of a pain in the ass for me to go to the casino. I don't as much as I used to. You know, we used to do that a lot when we were younger. When I owned my own business, a lot of Fridays would be, hey, we should just go to the casino until it's time for our wives to get off work. That would happen a lot. But like, you know, if it's 10 p.m. at night on a Tuesday, I tell my wife I'm driving 45 minutes up to Treasure Island up on the river here, like that's going to be a problem for me.
Having a wife is a pretty good cure for not just going to the casino for 3 hours on a Tuesday.
But if I go hide in the den and play on, you know, the DraftKings casino, nobody's gonna know the difference. And I think that's where some of these problem gamblers are gonna be like, it's the same thing. The barrier for entry is like, well, shit, I got to drive all the way to Detroit to go to MGM, or I go hide in the bathroom and play roulette. The wife won't know, and I really worry about some people once that starts, because you're already seeing that. Like I see a lot of ads that come across Twitter for the casino, like, you know, the engagement farmer ads or the engagement farm tweets where they're like, hey, here's a helmet for the Jets. Like, who's the first person you think of? That's fun. Like that's loves that shit. But I've seen one. It was just a picture of a roulette wheel. Like, what number are you placing? That's not as fun.
That's so low effort.
Yeah, it's just low effort. It's like, that's your ad. I'm like, God damn it, that's probably gonna work when people say like, oh, I can play roulette at DraftKings. I bet there's people that just have no idea that exists. And I worry, and hopefully some of the things I have seen, Ohio went legal recently, and they were a huge pain in the ass in a good way with some of the wording you could use around, because a risk-free bet is not a free bet. And there's been, for years, that's been phrased that way in sportsbook marketing. And Ohio just said, guess what? Nobody is using the word free anywhere.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
So it was kind of tricky to work around that for a lot of advertisers, which is fine. That's such as life. That's their job. But hopefully that's kind of a harbinger of things to come, as far as all the worries I have about the online casino stuff. If some of these regulatory agencies do actually take a stand on, hey, we're not going to let you guys, you know, be quite so predatory anymore, maybe that's a good sign here as we go along too.
Yeah, but I mean, like also at the same time, I like the idea of like not allowing people to donk off and get in $100,000 of debt playing online blackjack. But I don't know. In my opinion, if you're gonna cosplay as a free market economy, which I think a lot of people would argue is what is happening in the United States, like it's neither. Really what it is it's corporate socialism, right? The consumers, the people take on all the risk, and any time a business comes too close to failing, it ends up getting bailed out. And I hate that model. For sports books, because I can log onto my DraftKings account right now, bet $1,000 on the PSG money line, and no one's gonna, you know, if like, oh, no one's refunding me. No one's propping me up if I lose. But if I log into DraftKings and take them, you know, I hit a same game parlay on them, and then I try and do another one, they're gonna be like, no, the most you can win is $800. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet PSG now. There's just not enough time.
Yeah, they're down 2-0 now.
I think 3 on aggregate. So things are over for. Well, they just weren't as good this year. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying there too. It's tough. It's tough because how are the rich going to get richer if we don't let them? And again, what's the recourse here?
Well, I'm not even saying there needs to be any, like, if the sports books are going to be worth, if they're going to make $1 billion a year, like whatever, these are consenting adults entering into an agreement. But what I don't like is that an American citizen has the ability to literally go broke betting on sports, but I don't have the ability to recoup that money. At a certain point, they would tell me you can't win anymore. And I basically think that should not be allowed. I think in a country that's going to pretend to have a free market, I think that I think that part of and obviously this is never happening. Like, this is total pie in the sky shit. But I think that basically they should be like, I think it should be written in that you can't limit someone just because they're beating you for a bunch of money. Like, get better, set better lines, whatever.
That would be nice.
That's a soapbox type thing.
I know, and I wonder too. And you got what were the fantasy aces and draft, and I can't even think of the other ones you said because man, that's so long ago. But you wonder, and maybe I'd like to hear your prediction on this. Essentially, and granted, underdog and the forced parlay things are different. They're not FanDuel and DraftKings. Like, it's different.
It's totally different.
FanDuel and DraftKings are what I call legacy DFS. And you can do a little of that in a few other places, but they're it. Like, there's two shops, guys. And honestly, maybe there should only be one, which we've seen from FanDuel lately in the DFS world. But like, I've seen people make that prediction. Like, eventually the consolidation comes just like it did in DFS, and you only have a couple operators. And then maybe you see a little more regulation in that, where it's just like, hey, you guys already have a monopoly. You guys have
that's kind of the opposite of what happens, though. Theoretically, having 15 different sports books to choose from should actually make them want to take your action more, and should actually make them want to offer more fair prices than they do, and not offer outright markets on the Players Championship without a 30% hold. But it doesn't happen. And I mean, the big issue is that none of the legislators legislating any of this, they got no fucking clue. They don't know what a hold is. They don't know about, and I mean, that's kind of true. That's sort of, it's like, Gelman, have you heard of Gelman amnesia, which is like, you read an article in the newspaper that you know about, and you're like, everything in this is wrong. And then you turn the page and you read an article about water crisis in Myanmar, and you're like, this is, you're locked in. But it requires you basically forgetting what you just realized 30 seconds before. And it's sort of like, I guess it's sort of the inverse of that, where we know about this sports betting stuff real close, and we're like, well, obviously it should be legislated in X, Y, and Z different way, but the legislation for this other thing, that seems fine, right? And it's just that there's no specialists available in the government to make sure that this is legislated properly.
No, it's been, it's probably just too deep into its infancy still, where, a lot of these guys could tell you a ton about, hey, this farm subsidy bill is just fucked because look what's going to happen because we've been doing it for so long. And you get these people that are asked to vote and make decisions on sports betting. They're like, I don't know, 10% tax. That sounds about right. And it's the same thing too. When you see these reports and it says, here's how much money the sports books made in this state over this period of time. And a lot of people would look at that and be like, well, they did pretty good. And someone who actually knows, like, they did too well. Like, that's a problem. Like, that's going to be a very big long-term problem for them because, again, they're just churning through people too fast. They're not going to replacing those people because they won too much too quick. And at that point, a lot of the big volume bettors are getting limited. All the shitty bettors, a volume of people are quitting because they just got the shit kicked out of them by, 20% holds. And at that point, you're, a year, 2 years from now, those numbers are going to look horrible because you bled people dry too fast. And I don't know. It'll be interesting. Basically, every guess I've had at how things are going to go has been a little wrong, other than, the consolidation starting to happen. And I don't even know if it'll be true consolidation, more of like, hey, if you're too small, if you're not like the big five, you just might be done. Unless you take a Circa model where hey, we're not going to go to every state. Circa won't ever be in New York because
they charge them too much money.
The tax rates are too high. Like they're only going to be in states where it's feasible for them to work on their model. So I think there'll be operators like that, but they just won't be in the markets that people want
that you want them to be in.
Yeah, because it's like, well, we're not going to come there because we're going to lose, or we're going to have to change the way we do business, and we're not doing either. So see ya. So yeah, I wonder what we see in like 3 years, if it's just 4 or 5 sports books and then a few that run that kind of model that are very limited as far as which municipalities, which states they're in.
Yeah. So in Canada, does it work the same way? Like I know for a long time in Canada, they used to do the forced parlay model, but in a different way. You just opened up the menu and you're like, yeah, you gotta parlay everything. But I guess I should ask Mayo about this. But I assume it's similar there.
The regulations up there are wild. Like essentially affiliate marketing is not a thing. They really have some weird regulations. I don't fully understand. They have a ton of operators, and there's so many different rules from province to province. I must have state to state, but yeah, the old Pro Line stuff. We actually had Plus EV on years ago to talk about that, because it's the same thing as there's people that beat same game parlays, guys, because we say like, hey, we're bad at math. Not everyone's bad at math. There's people that understand the correlation.
No, and the people. So you make a great point, which is that if you can figure out what the algorithm is doing, if you can figure out how it's pricing things and what its blind spot might be, that is huge. Like I have a buddy in one of these Discord gambling chats. One of the things he figured out was that the DraftKings algorithm was treating the running back rushing yards and receiving yards and rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns like they were uncorrelated or negatively correlated. But actually, if you think about it, it's not, because it's probably like Christian McCaffrey's having a great game, so he just gets a bunch of yards and gets a bunch of touches. Those are probably positively correlated, and that was one of the things. Or like treating Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill like they were uncorrelated or negatively correlated, when they're not. They're actually probably likely to do it together or whatever. So you're right. I'm not one of these people, but there are people who do beat these parlays to some degree.
Yeah, because like let's really separate. Let's say PSG versus Bayern, which is over at this point, and something happening in the United States, like a spring training game that's in Arizona. They're worlds apart, different sports. People who are watching the PSG game probably don't even know what spring training is for baseball. Like the level of correlation is 0. So if it's both minus 110, it's just, 2.6. Like that's your parlay price, or 3.6, right? Plus 260. That's your parlay price, is just multiplying that. And like the level of correlation, once you get into the same game parlays, is something that it can be solved. And there's people that are working on that. But at that point too, like those people are going to be like, it's the same thing. It's a lot of work to probably just get limited, and it's a lot of fun, but every solution you find ends up just creating more problems, honestly, in the long run with some of that stuff. So it probably does require cover play, and it does, again, harken back to thinking those Pro Line ones where, some of the shit he would place would be like not 1,000,000 to 1, but huge stupid odds. And it's like, hey, this is a really big long shot, but in the right conditions, the correlation between all these things is so high that like it shouldn't pay 400 to 1. Like this should be much lower. And it just takes a few.
Well, that's another thing too, is the difference between making a plus EV wager and realizing that equity. Like people don't make that. Like just the point at which you've made a wager that you consider to be plus EV, like that's all that matters. It doesn't, if you're on this is actually something that people have a hard time with in DFS, is they're like, oh yeah, I won 3 GPPs this year. I'm a winning player or whatever. It's like, well, maybe you are, or maybe you just sun run or whatever, or I'm losing, but my lineups were good. My lineups were unique, like just whatever. whatever it might be. Like it's, and I mean, I have a hard time with that too, but realizing the distinction between expected value and like realizing that expected value is hard.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a massive sample size, and sometimes you still just lose. Like I see outliers with stuff all the time with people. Like just this guy's that bets tennis. Like a retirement can hurt you or help you. He went. It was so many matches in a row where the retirement hurt him. Where that's the sort of stuff like, hey, this game went to overtime and it was a pick 'em. Like not everything is 50-50, but on a long scale, if you bet a pick 'em in a basketball game, it goes to overtime and nothing is materially changed. Like you should probably win half of those, just on average. And if you beat the line by a bunch, you should win by more of those. And sometimes it takes a really big sample size to get that, and sometimes you just never get there. I see that a lot too with people who come out hot in some sports. Like I'm really good at this. I'm like, yeah, you are this year. Like I've had that experience too with stuff. It's like I gotta update some things. Something that worked last year isn't working this year, and at this point,
I've had
donking money away.
I've had 4 second places in golf already this year. 4 doesn't feel very good. Feels pretty bad actually.
Yeah, I had Morikawa in the first tournament of the year, which I essentially spent that money. I think he was like minus 850 going into the 4th round. It was I
had Rory last week.
Mm-hmm.
I had Tyler Duncan, who was 3rd last week at the Honda Classic. I didn't at the Genesis. I had Nick Taylor, who lost who finished 2nd at the Phoenix Open. I mean, why am I even doing this to myself? This is so painful. Yeah, I'm sick. I can't do it anymore. We got to buy a win. We got to buy a win pretty soon here. Cause that's the thing with golf betting too. With golf betting, I mean, you could be getting it in really good. Like you can just be making really good wagers week after week, but you just got to get over the course of the season, you got to get like 3. That's kind of been the magic number for me is if you can get 3, you're either, I guess, depending on who the winners are, you're either going to break even or come ahead pretty good.
Yeah, I know. That's why, again, with the first tournament of the year, it was 25, 28 to 1, something like that. I remember thinking that, like, all right, I'm set up. Like, I'm not digging out of a outright hole for like 2 months to try to find my first one at like Arnold Palmer or something, because that always happens. So that bothered me. Like, that's going to stick in my craw for many, many, many years. So hopefully, and again, if you're making outright bets and they finish in the top 5, like you're making good bets. Like,
sure,
and for the most part, like if you bet, Rahm in Mexico where he was like 3 to 1 and he finishes in the top 10, I can't tell you like you made an exceptional bet, but for the most part, if your golfers are finishing well, you're doing something right with the numbers you're running. So it should turn out well in the long run, and then you'll get limited to kind of circle around.
Well, golf betting is probably the most fascinating market because everyone's copying off the same source, more or less. Everyone uses data golf stuff either as a starting point or as a checkpoint. And that is not true in any other sport. I don't think there's one tennis sport. I mean, I have caught books straight up copying data golf's prices for head-to-heads, like literally mirror prices on like 10 lines or whatever, like to the point of like, this is not an accident, which is, I mean, I guess if someone thought they had better numbers than the data golf guys, I guess that would be pretty fascinating.
No, and sometimes that's this has changed since I've talked to this, but I talked to somebody out in Vegas who worked in a back room, and he said, yeah, he does this, but he also does tennis numbers too. I said, oh, how do you originate your tennis numbers? He's like, Pinnacle? He just looked at me like I had 2 heads. He's like, no, there's no volume. I'm not spending time on that. Like, we're just going to use Pinnacle's numbers. Like the time investment for me to like originate tennis for our book would be silly for how many people bet it. Like, here's a really good sports book that the numbers probably already pretty good. And that's kind of what we're going to do with this. And, that evolves over time too, as markets pick up. But yeah, the golf one is kind of weird. You do see that where there's a lot of groupthink with some of the prices. That's why I do like the offshores with golf. They have way different markets than a lot of what you'll see in the regulated markets. Like I don't fully understand some of these matchups they're putting together on like the regulated books at all. And I guess a lot of them are just like, hey, everybody has this, we better have it, but at minus 118.
Yes. Yeah, that is definitely the case. I mean, golf is a weird thing to price anyways, because like it's a smaller everything but the outright market is smaller, lower liquidity, and you're going to be opening yourself up to people picking you off who have better numbers and have spent more time simming the stuff out and figuring it out than you have. So I don't really blame them for doing the golf that way, really.
No, somebody, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was EPAT. Honestly, I think it was. He put a tweet out and said like, hey, what's a market you want to see in golf betting in the future? And I said, I want 2 drop-down lists that have all 150 players on it, and I want to pick my own matchup, and your back end prices it.
Yeah. That's great. I love it.
I've been, and I said, I didn't say it out loud, but I said this to somebody. I'm like, they'd have to charge like a pretty heavy over round because you're pricing. I mean, what is 150? You know, the amount of permutations you could have between those, you know, and then trying to price like John Rahm versus
Akshay Bhatia.
Yeah, like, well, even like some of these, like, hey, this guy plays. He's a fill-in. He's 60. He plays like 3 tournaments every 5 years. Like maybe you wouldn't get everybody. Maybe they'd have to leave out some of that, but you know, at least like the top 80 or so players, give me prices on that sort of stuff. I'd love to see that. And I said that to somebody, they'd have to charge. Like if it was, you know, these 2 are equal players and it was minus 125 on either side, I'd probably wouldn't fault them at all because it's a pain in the ass market to try to provide thousands of different prices on.
And I guess as a bookmaker, though, you wouldn't really be worried if people reverse engineered your pricing either, though. Like, I guess that would be like why a golf tout would be like, yeah, we're not gonna give you that because then you could reverse engineer our stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it would be in line with the, you know, the outright prices, but there'd be small discrepancies that I think people could probably, like you said, pick it apart.
Tiger and Spieth. It would be where it those are the ones I see where it's like Spieth, it'll be 20-1 to win a tournament, but he'll be a dog to Sam Burns and head-to-heads or whatever.
Yeah, there's a big disparity, and a lot of that because you're just paying a tax for a name you want to bet. So yeah, I like that.
Well, I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground, bud.
Just kind of wrapping. That's right. I know Dan's like, what should we call this episode? I'm like, I don't know. Me and Davis are just gonna talk. Like we're just gonna have a convo about everything that's happening in the world right now. We did cover a lot of ground. And yeah, I think I'm gonna go finish my golf newsletter, make a few more head-to-head bets. My outright card is finished. I have the winner this week.
Who's okay?
I've been manifesting that. I don't even remember who my card is at this point.
I got Cantlay and JT at the top of the cards. That's what I'm feeling.
Shoffley, Day, Hovland, Finau, Hatton. I just stayed away from the whole top. So I'm doing this every week in these elevated events. Like give me the names that could be in the 20s that are in the 30s and 40s instead. Almost had it last week with Hovland. You can say that, but there was like 9 guys that were right there. But God damn it, he was one of them. And
that's the other thing about golf betting is you can always convince yourself you're pretty close if a guy sneaks in on Sunday.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it wasn't like the Rahm goes -5 on the back 9 and top 10s. You know, it was Victor Hovland had a shot. He just decided to do some Victor Hovland shit, and that's kind of my lot in life right now. So I will. I'll have some more golf betting stuff. We'll talk golf betting on brown bag bets all week. I'll have some outrights or some matchups as we go. But yeah, I thank you, Mr. Mattek, for joining me today. You did a very fine job of playing fill-in host here while Drew's off. He says I don't feel as bad now. He says it's very cold. Says it's nice. The skiing's great, but it's very, very cold. So good, you Southern California doofus.
You got to get your base layer up. It's all about that. I went skiing a couple weeks ago. That's what I learned is like, if your base layer is good, you're not going to feel cold.
Yeah, I'm guessing he just packed like a t-shirt because he's from California. Just doesn't know better. So
he doesn't get it.
At Davis Mattek, Mattek, in case you're taking this in, just listening and you have no idea how to spell the name, or you don't already follow him, but you should if you want some just content, Twitter content in your eyeballs. So appreciate you guys. If you listen to this, leave a review, follow us on Twitter, all that stuff, and we'll catch you back here next week. I have no idea what we're talking about next week, but Drew did make a schedule. It might be March Madness Calcutta's. We've had a request for Calcutta talk a couple times because there's some layers there. So we'll catch you next week, and I'll figure it out before then.